Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I know I'm a little bit late to this topic and this subject, but I wanted to still share my thoughts because this whole thing that's come out recently about Dior made me reflect on the last few years, and I wanted to have this conversation with you, not only about what's happened recently with Dior, but also just the noise that has been growing over the last few years that for myself, I wasn't even aware of. So I wanted to sit down and kind of share what we've been seeing over the last few years and just the state of luxury fashion and designer fashion at the moment. And I want to kind of take the temperature to see how you're feeling. If you were here for my handbag days, you would know that I was Dior obsessed. I was the crazy Dior girl. I was the go-to Dior girl, the self-labeled go-to Dior girl. And if you weren't here for that time, don't worry, you didn't miss much. But just to catch you up, I basically thought of every Dior bag like Pokemon. Gotta catch them all was my motto. And I was in love with Christian Dior, the history, the story, the brand, the customer service, the designs. I loved it. And I am no longer as obsessed about designer fashion and Dior for that matter. There's certain things about the designs and the history and the stories that I've heard that I will probably always love, but it's no longer part of my identity. I also wanted to say that everything in today's video is alleged, purely for entertainment purposes only. I am not trying to get sued by LVMH, okay? Your girl cannot afford that. I shared a video, oh God, going on maybe 8-9 months ago now, and I'm gonna have it linked if you haven't seen that one. I highly recommend checking it out. But it was something along the lines of, I think the title was The Greatest Lie, the greatest luxury fashion lie. And I actually pinned a comment to that video because I felt the video was getting too long. And I actually cut out a whole portion of that video that I talked about sweatshops and a lot of production now moving to sweatshops and to China and kind of having majority of bags and products created there and then sent back to Italy and France just to kind of have some finishing touches and to have that pretty, very trusted, not so much anymore, trusted tag label that says made in Italy or made in France. I received comments, some a bit nicer than others, basically telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I was stupid, that it was all just a conspiracy, like absolutely not true. How stupid could you be? How far-fetched the whole idea was. And I wanted to film this video because it seems that the noise surrounding the fact that it's now a fact, let's really call it what it is that the production of designer fashion is no longer what it used to be. And we are seeing and we are hearing, and it is being alleged that these bags are being produced in sweatshops in Europe and also in China and various other countries around the world. In case you didn't know, I want to catch you up on the semi-recent scandal, if you will, that has taken place with Dior and also Armani. I'm going to be reading from the Business of Fashion article, and I will have all of the articles that I'm referencing in today's video linked down below if you'd like to have a read of them. But a Milan court placed LVMH subsidiary that makes bags for Dior under court administration for failing to ensure suppliers were meeting Italian labor standards. In April, similar measures were taken against an Armani unit. Milan prosecutors and Italian police are still investigating manufacturers linked to around a dozen more fashion brands. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. The fact that 12 other fashion brands are currently under investigation. Drop your guesses and your speculation in the comments down below as to what brands you think are currently being under investigation. I mean, I have a few guesses. Allegedly, Louis Vuitton. Sorry, it's just something caught in my throat. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. And according to Italian police, factories manufacturing for Dior and Armani, in some cases directly and in some cases through subcontracting, were found to be operating without regard for health and safety or labor standards. Investigators found illegal and undocumented workers living and working in facilities where production went unceasingly day and night, and safety devices had been removed from machinery to allow the workers to operate faster. As a result, the suppliers were able to slash costs, which, you know, if you watch that video and if you've been hearing the discussions regarding designer fashion, is now the most important thing, it seems. Profit is the most important thing to these brands. The LVMH subsidiary sanctioned this week was paying as little as 53 euros per unit to procure handbags that retailed for 2,600. According to reports on the court findings, Armani bags that sell for 1,800 in store were being made by a Chinese subcontractor for 93 apiece and sold onto the group by a middleman at 250 each, according to the media reports. They will be supervised by an external commissioner until magistrates decide they have adequately addressed the lapse. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments down below kind of where you're at, because I know for me personally, this idea that I'm now looking at my handbags that I still own and wondering, wow, I wonder how much these handbags were made for and where exactly they were made. Some of them I paid thousands and thousands of dollars for, and I wonder how they were made. And these are things that I never thought about before. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Are you as interested in Dior and these brands? Are you as interested in purchasing? Are you interested in still owning them? Have you got any, or did you have any particular bags that you wanted to buy for thousands of dollars and now have been kind of put off by that idea? There is some speculation that it is most likely a canvas bag that they're referring to in this investigation, in this media report, just because leather, I think, takes a little bit more and costs a little bit more to produce. And so much of Dior's styles now and popular styles are those canvas fabric bags, you know, with the Dior monogram and the very beautiful patterns that, if I'm being completely honest, just are getting a bit tired in my opinion. We're seeing the same repeated designs and fashion pieces again and again and again and again and again. Because to me it seems that we've talked about this, and I just mentioned this before, but profit is king. Profit is king. And when Maria Grazia first came into Dior, I was in love. I loved everything she produced. And now it's getting to the point where I'm a little bit tired. But it's working, I suppose. I mean, it was until this controversy. Some recent pieces that were launched were literally just the same things from years past, just in different colors. And that's kind of the direction a lot of fashion brands are going now. They're playing it safe. They're looking at what's selling, what's working, and just replicating those designs with very minimal detail changes or color changes to maximize profit, because profit is most important. It seems now with a lot of these brands that creativity, the artistry, the designs, the quality, the ethical element is no longer important, and profit is number one. Because of these giant conglomerates, they need to please their shareholders. Growth is at the forefront of their mind constantly. And when you put growth and profit over everything else, in my opinion, there's only so long that you can stay at the top, especially in this current time where people are waking up. I think we're living in a time now where not everybody, and again, to say, people get annoyed when I use the term waking up, because then it implies that the people that don't feel this way or don't have these thoughts are asleep, are ignorant, are stupid. And I don't at all mean that. I mean, a lot of people are just waking up to the reality of the world and the reality of certain situations. And some people it doesn't affect and others it does. And I would love to hear from you in the comments down below if it's affecting you in any way. It's actually not funny, let's be honest. Those damn Dior tops, I bought 4 of them. $1,000 a pop, just under $1,000 a pop, and I've been trying to sell them for years. Do you think I can sell them? Absolutely not. Not even for 200 bucks. Nobody wants a Dior "we should all be feminists" or the various other slogans that I was brainwashed into loving when I was younger. Nobody wants them now. They're literally sitting in my drawer and they're used as my bed tops. Okay, nobody wants them. And I just find it very ironic that these tops that were and are still sold for, God, probably over $1,000 Australian now, with these, you know, human rights slogans about feminism and people's rights and women's rights. Dior doesn't care. These brands don't care about women's rights, let alone human rights, because the irony is they are literally engaging in illegal sweatshops where people are sleeping on the floor and working tirelessly day and night to produce these pieces for a fraction of the cost and selling them on for thousands of dollars. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a brand that cares about feminism or women's rights, or just human rights for that matter. I don't know if I'll ever, honestly, be as in love with designer fashion as I once was. I'm very disillusioned by a lot of the things that I'm seeing and a lot of the prices, especially for fashion pieces. Jewelry, I'm still kind of like, oh, you know, I love my jewelry. But the clothing, the handbags, the shoes, You know, let's think about if these canvas bags cost $50 to produce or 50 euros, and they're selling them on for, you know, $2,500 or whatever. Shoes, how much do you reckon the shoes cost to produce? These Chanel shoes that I've bought in the past and, you know, God, probably still buy. God, even the Hermes sandals, how much do you think they cost to produce? And they sell them on for a wickedly high profit. Business. I do want to take a moment to touch on the regulations, the manufacturing laws that are supposedly coming into effect. This is a big deal. This is a big deal if this ends up going anywhere. I mean, apparently it is. I'm going to be very interested to see the state of designer fashion and just the state of fashion in a few years' time. So there are regulations that got signed off, and I'm going to just run through some of them for you. Big businesses operating in Europe will be required to ensure their supply chains are not linked to labor abuses or environmental destruction under a landmark due diligence rule. Companies with more than 1,000 employees and a net worldwide turnover of more than 450 million will need to audit suppliers and logistic partners from 2029. Taking action to prevent or address any malpractice, larger businesses will need to comply even sooner than 2029. In regards to forced labor, the EU will introduce a ban on goods made using forced labor. It will come into force 3 years after it officially enters into law. Regarding eco-design, clothes and footwear sold in the EU will need to be more reusable, repairable, upgradable, and recyclable under new rules intended to crack down on wasteful and excessive production and consumption, with textiles as a key focus. Companies will also need to plan to provide more environmental information to consumers via digital product passports, and they will be required to publish details of unsold products each year. This is really big, guys. If this ends up actually becoming a thing, it's hard for me to imagine it. I'd like to hear from you in the comments down below, especially if you know more about, you know, these type of things. And even if you are a European citizen, I would love to hear from you. If you're living in Europe at the moment, what is being talked about? Is this being talked about in mainstream news? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. We know that fashion is one of the most wasteful industries on the planet. It causes the most destruction. Got the amount that ends up in landfill. And a lot of these designer brands, we know they don't discount their products. Their things never go on sale. They would literally rather burn their pieces than sell them for less, to further keep this idea and the illusion that these are worthwhile and exclusive and status symbols. And to a lot of people, and don't get me wrong, I still feel this way, these are status symbols. These are exclusive in some way, and they're a status symbol. But I think now the more and more it's coming out, it's hard to see these pieces that way. It's hard to see them for what we once believed them to be, especially when this illusion is shattered. You know, the illusion that the more you pay, I always used to believe, the more I pay. And I always used to use this as an excuse and a reason to shop this way. I used to say, I buy designer fashion because it's more expensive. That means the quality's better, and it means it's more ethical. And we're now seeing that's not at all the case. It's a very rude awakening for a lot of people, I think, including myself. Fashion brands operating in Europe will be forbidden from destroying unsold clothes within 2 years of the new rule coming into force. So basically, what does this mean for fashion? Well, the regulations build on legislation that's already rolling out, requiring large brands to do more to ensure their supply chains are free from deforestation and provide much more data about their environmental and social impact. Efforts to introduce similar regulations are also underway in the US. I'm going to be following this. I do find this incredibly interesting. I don't know, maybe I just had my head in a cloud or in the sand, but if you follow fashion news, which if I'm being completely honest, I wasn't for so long. I wasn't following this type of fashion news anyway. There have been quite a number of offenders in most recent years, and when I was busy shopping up a storm with my credit card and coming on doing weekly unboxings, I didn't know of any of these things. And I'd love to hear if you were aware of them either. Semi-recently, the brand Laura Piani, probably said that wrong, Laura Piana. You may know them as a brand that is very much quiet luxury, very, very expensive pieces. And I remember when I was going through my whole transition and moving away from logos, and I was very put off by these logo mania pieces, my thought was, oh, well, quiet luxury, more subdued, more subtle pieces. Laura Piana was a brand on my radar. And it's just very interesting now that these things are coming out. Laura Piana's $9,000 sweaters rely on unpaid farmers in Peru. I'm going to have this article linked if you want to have a read of it in its entirety. But 30 years of providing the world's finest wool to the fashion house has done almost nothing for the indigenous people of Peru. These big brands, a lot of them seem to be offenders of unpaid labor, cutting corners to put profit as number one. These Laura Piana pieces are not cheap. They are very, 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 very expensive. So to hear this is quite shocking. So the more that I looked into this, the more I realized that there were so many brands that I used to love, used to be obsessed with, that have come under fire, come under scrutiny in the media. One that also comes to mind that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, this one particular brand, Alverio Martini, probably didn't pronounce that right. I stumbled across this brand when I first went to Italy, and in around January of this year, the Italian fashion house was placed in judicial receivership on suspicion of using exploited Chinese black labor, this article called it, to make its designer bags. Profits were allegedly maximized by using Chinese sweatshops and resorting to illegal labor. I bought these pieces when I first went to Rome. I bought a pair of shoes and a map bag, and I loved their designs. I thought, oh my gosh, like I wanted their suitcases, I wanted their luggage. I couldn't get much else because I couldn't get it home. But I fell in love with that brand. I fell in love with the designs. Come to think, how much I spend, and with the currency conversion, it cost me a lot more for those pieces. With my Australian dollars, it ended up costing me more. Obviously, these pieces aren't Chanel prices, but they're still quite expensive. And I think I probably spent like an hour and a half probably in this store. And looking back, I'm very annoyed, very annoyed. And if I was to know that these pieces were created potentially in illegal sweatshops with forced labor, allegedly, I wouldn't have bought them. I wouldn't have wasted my time. I wouldn't have wasted precious time in freaking Italy in a store when I could have been out exploring. I mean, I did lots of exploring, but it's really made me aware. I said this a while ago as well, that now when I travel, I don't spend as much time in these stores, in these four walls with these things, because they don't mean as much to me. And now that I've come to realize how many of them are potentially made in illegal sweatshops and with forced labor for how much they're trying to charge me, it just feels like a con. And it also feels like I'm trading my time, not only my money, but also my time for these things when I could be out seeing the world and seeing more of where I am. I ended up selling my Dior tote, or did I return it? I can't remember. Did I sell it or return it? Anyway, I Dior book tote. I'm pretty sure that's not the bag that Dior is under fire for. No, none of us really know, but I would be so annoyed if I had that bag in my collection right now, and the thought that I paid thousands of dollars for it, to wonder how much it was produced for. We've seen these Dior book totes. They're very popular and they're very replicated as well. So I really wonder how much the Dior book tote costs to make, because I don't think it would be far off the $50 mark, to be honest. Maybe a little bit more because of its size. I don't know. I honestly don't know enough about these things, but it's a very rude awakening, that's for sure. I'm gonna have this another article link that I found from 2020. Again, what was I doing? Had my head in the sand, shopping up a storm. I don't know why. Where was I going? Nowhere. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. But in 2020, this New York Times article stated that for many years, Dior, Saint Laurent, and other fashion brands have been quietly using Indian embroiderers for their goods, depending on their expertise, while offering little in the way of employment protection. Are we surprised? I mean, look what else has come out recently. But this one article says they sewed without health benefits in a multi-room factory with caged windows and no emergency exit, where they earned a few dollars a day completing subcontracted orders for international designers. When night fell, some slept on the floor. I'll have that article again linked if you want to read it in its entirety. This seems to be a conversation that has been had for years, and just the conversation is getting louder and louder. I found this one Daily Mail article, again, it's from 2018, which back in 2018, I was still very much under the spell and the belief that these pieces were created ethically, when now we're coming to realize that a lot of them are not. I'm going to have this article linked if you want to read it. It came out in 2018, and it talks about luxury fashion brands like Prada, Fendi, that use exploited factory workers to make products. This has clearly been a conversation that people have been having for years. Back in 2018, I was still under the spell and under the illusion that these things were made ethically, and that they were so expensive because they were made so well, because they were made ethically, sustainably, and were good quality. And we're really seeing that illusion being shattered, and the conversations are getting louder and louder, and I think they're very hard to ignore. I think for so long, luxury fashion brands were able to get away with this because nobody had their eye on them. All of the name, shame, and blame game was on these fast fashion retailers for how unethical they were. These companies, for so long, I think, were able to get away with these things because they never had this much heat on them. They never had this level of scrutiny compared to these fast fashion brands. And I think it's potentially a rude awakening, not only for them, but for a lot of customers, consumers as well, people that put their money towards these things. I'm going to have this link down below as well. I'm going to just go over it ever so quickly because it's quite a long, it's like 152 pages. So if you want to check it out, I'm going to have it linked below. But it's something called the Fashion Transparency Index. And again, we don't know how accurate this is, but this is 2023 edition. And I found this incredibly interesting. I just want to highlight some things from this particular fashion index. And here you have, as you can see, you have a guide to the final scoring. I just want to highlight these three columns here. So the 0 to 5%, the 6 to 10%, and the 11 to 20%. So the 0 to 5%, brands scoring between 0 to 5 are disclosing nothing at all or a very limited number of policies, which tend to be related to the brand's hiring practices or local community engagement activities. Where there are very low levels of disclosure, the information that is published is often required by law. For example, a modern slavery statement or gender pay gap report. So just very, very little information is shared. 6 to 10% are likely to be publishing some policies for both their employees and suppliers. Those closer to 10% are more likely to be publishing a basic supplier code of conduct, some information and their procedures, and limited information about their supplier assessment process. So a little bit better than, the 0 to 5, but still very little information is shared. You can read this entirety if you want because it's a very large document. But the next one over is brands scoring between 11 and 20% are likely to publishing many policies for both employees and suppliers, some procedures and some information about their supplier assessment. These brands will most likely not be publishing supplier lists and won't be sharing much information, if anything, about our spotlight issues, decent work and purchasing practices, gender and racial equality, sustainable and sourcing materials, overconsumption, waste and circularity, water and chemicals, and climate change and biodiversity. So you get the gist. The next page, just some brands that stand out to me in the 0 to 10% category are brands like Tom Ford, Max Mara, Tory Burch, Dolce & Gabbana. These are very expensive brands. Saks Fifth Avenue. The next column with 11 to 20% has brands like Chanel, Carolina Herrera, Jill Sander. The list goes on. I mean, Louis Vuitton and Celine are in the 21 to 30% category. Michael Kors as well. So this is a very interesting read if you want to have a look at it. I highly recommend. Like I said, I will have it linked down below. I'd like to know from you, do you think there is still a very large number of people who are still absolutely in love and worship these brands? I think when I kind of came out and expressed my distaste for shopping and how much I was shopping, and then I kind of fell down this rabbit hole of luxury brands and the industry as a whole, and the things that I realized about the industry now, putting profit above everything, and a lot of the things that I talked about and the lies that I was sold in that video I shared. It's very much a fast-paced, get you in and out, onto the next customer, onto the next sale, money-making. Profit is single-minded focus of these houses. For most brands, I think the profit is anywhere from 10 to 12 times. And I think for Louis Vuitton, it's something like 13 times. I had a lot of people kind of share and express their frustrations, very much defensive and very, very in defense of these brands. And I do think that there is still a number of people who will defend these brands and luxury fashion, designer fashion in this industry the way that they would defend their political views or their religious beliefs. And it's quite incredible to see, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. I find it very fascinating to see the lengths that people will go to, and it just shows how absolutely genius, but also like semi-evil marketing can be, because this is the result of very, very, very powerful marketing, isn't it? When part of your identity is tied to something. I mean, we see it with iPhone. We see it with these people that line up and sleep in tents to purchase the new iPhone the morning of. These brands, these things, much like some people feel about certain luxury brands, designer brands, I should say, it's part of their identity. They will defend these brands to the end of the earth. It's part of who they are. They will defend these brands probably more, if not the same amount of what they would defend themselves or the people they love. It's very, very interesting when you really analyze it, when you really look into it, when you see it, and when you hear people defend these brands like they're defending their life. So I'd like to hear from you in the comments down below. Do you think that there are still a large number of people who buy designer fashion who don't care about these things that are coming out, who don't care about the cost of production, who don't care about that narrative, who potentially once upon a time said, oh yeah, I buy it for the quality and I buy it because it's more ethical. those arguments necessarily can't be used with the same level of strength they used to be.
I don't give a f***. I don't care about homeless people.
People get very annoyed when I say things like that. Like luxury is a status symbol and this, that, and the other. But I believe it is. I believe it's a status symbol. I believe a lot of things, a lot of things. Think of the car we drive, what we do for work, where we send our kids to school, even down to the kind of dog that we own. Do we own a pedigree dog? Do we own a designer dog? Or do we have a rescue dog or a mutt, if you will? These are all, I think, in a way, status symbols or ways that we signal to the rest of the world the kind of person we are and what we believe and what we like. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just find it very interesting. I do think though that some people are so heavily obsessed with designer items that you could literally bag up like, I don't know, some cow some cow manure and label it, Coco Chanel's actual human feces and brand it and market it and stick a 4-figure price tag on it. And there'd be some people that would literally be frothing at the mouth at the chance to own a piece of Chanel's. Obviously that's an extreme example and I'm slightly kidding. But even the Nutella jar, I posted this on my Instagram. There's literally a jar with Louis Vuitton on it. And it's just selling for what, $500 on eBay? It's literally just Nutella. If I blindfolded you and made you eat Nutella from a normal jar or Nutella from this jar, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. Some of these things are so attractive to people because of the label and the logo. It's just because it's that brand. They're just obsessed. They want it. They need it. They need a $500 jar of Nutella.
Shut up and take my money.
I feel like we got majorly off topic there talking about cow shit. Anyway, I think within the next few years, like I said, we're going to see a lot of changes, hopefully, in the fashion space. I'm going to keep an eye on my Vogue YouTube channel and my designer brand YouTube channels, because you know how sometimes, I think they did one recently, semi-recently, with the Birkin. Dior have done things before, like, where they show you how they make bags from start to finish, and it's all very pretty and it's all very pristine and the lighting's perfect and it's just this clean, beautiful, crisp, aesthetically pleasing factory. And I think we'll probably end up seeing more of those, to be honest, to just further prove, oh no, look, we're doing things right. Look how beautiful our factories are. When actual fact, hello, like social media isn't real. Why would I think that these videos were real? Why would I think that these perfectly edited and perfectly aesthetically pleasing, these beautiful sewing machines, these perfectly designed bags with their backdrops of these perfectly lit factories were real? It's probably a stage. It's probably a set. It's an illusion. And I wonder if we'll see more of those. I wonder if that'll be in the pipeline of ways to get people more believing. I wonder if we'll see more of those. To end today's video, I suppose I want to just share another story with you. When I went to Milan for the first time, only time really, I took a tour with a woman who worked in the fashion industry. She took these fashion tours and it was like a 3-hour tour, and we went around to a lot of different brands, a lot of different stores. Some of them were more well-known brands, Italian brands. Others were more kind of unknown, more smaller brands. And one of my favorite memories from that tour that literally now more than ever is just so much more impactful. Like in the moment I was very much impacted, but now the more that's coming out about these things that we've talked about today, it's so much more impactful to me. So we went into this one hat store, and funnily, I don't even remember the name of the hat store, probably because it wasn't appealing to me. They were mainly like kind of older gentleman style hats. It was like a man's hat store basically. It was very much a made to measure store. And she took me into the back room and there was 5 old Italian men who didn't speak a word of English making these hats. And the entire production was in the back room. These hats were very expensive, but this was their entire production. You know, they didn't offshore, they didn't send it off to anyone else. These pieces were made in Milan, in the back room, by a number of these men. And that really hit me, because at the time I was like, wow, this is why I shop designer. This is why I shop luxury, because this is what happens. And now I've come to realize it's not actually what happens at a lot of stores. But I think that it's a dying trait, it's a dying way of production, and I wish it wouldn't be, I wish it wasn't. And like I said, that moment is so much more impactful to me, and it's so much more heavy hitting now more than ever. Because I recognize, and I've felt this way for maybe a year or so, but my idea of luxury is that. My idea of luxury is made to measure, is luxury to me is supporting smaller brands who obviously, yes, want to make a profit. Why are you in business if you're not trying to make a profit? You're not running a charity. Yes, they want to make a profit, but profit isn't put ahead of the customer, of the quality. I would much rather support an up and coming brand or an older brand that has seen growth but has still not taken it so far to the point where they've just gotten greedy. I don't know if we're moving in that direction, or maybe I'm just kind of a minority in that sense, but I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Share with me what you think of today's conversation and what you think of the changes that we're seeing in the designer fashion space, and whether or not you feel differently about spending thousands of dollars. I mean, if you were someone who ever did, or if you're one of my newer subscribers here, please share with me what you think about this. If you were someone who was never interested in designer fashion, what do you think of this? I would love to hear from you, regardless of whether you love designer fashion or you don't. Please share with me where you're at right now. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to have another few linked for you there if you'd like to check those out. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.